Hey everybody, I'm Ben Yee.
I'm Alyssa Stein, and this is our second filming of today because we want to be really clear and concise about the things we want to talk about today. Because when it comes to local politics, and any politics for that matter, it can be a little bit messy and confusing for
You
people
just
who
jump
don't
down
know.
a rabbit hole.
Right, so we're here to explain things, and our last go round, it turns out we didn't explain things very well. So we're doing this again to hopefully really shed a light on the petitioning process and endorsements.
Right, so last time we spoke a bit about endorsements,
Right.
And how people make decisions, and people and organizations make decisions about who they'll endorse. And one thing that we didn't mention actually, which I wanted to make sure that we said, is a lot of the groups that make endorsements, those endorsements are made by a vote of the membership. So if you're looking around and you're saying, well, how did this person get the endorsement? Why are these people endorsing this person? A lot of it is done through voting if you're a member of the club or the organization. So if you don't like what's going on, get involved and become a member so that you can vote on these endorsements.
All right, so I'm going to throw in there that you are up for endorsement.
I am.
And there's going to be a meeting this Thursday.
Yes.
Village Independent Democrats. It's an endorsement meeting. So if somebody's interested in coming out and seeing how this works, that's great. But if you're not already a member, you can't vote. So as you just mentioned, that it's important to vote in these processes so you're part of the endorsement process. But as you said before, it's important to join in advance because no club wants this sudden rush of enthusiastic people who want to influence or swing an endorsement. So you have to sign up usually 3 months in advance, or it depends on the club or organization, so that you're a standing member and then you have the right to vote. So for Village Independent Democrats, it's a 3-month waiting period and then you're entitled to vote. Regardless, I mean, if you are a member, come out and vote and have your say. If you're not a member yet, come and see how the process works.
Yes, absolutely. And what I will add a slight caveat to is it's not just that they don't want a bunch of new energetic people coming and shifting the power dynamic of the club. Some of it has to do with preventing wily candidates from recruiting a bunch of random people and packing clubs right before their endorsement election. So you can imagine that I could be up for endorsement on Thursday. Somebody who's completely unannounced could come in and they'd bring 50 people with them.
All their relatives.
All their relatives, and they would just win that endorsement vote. In order to prevent that kind of thing, you want to make sure that somebody has demonstrated some level of investment with the club or the community beforehand, which is actually a lot of how folks who are already in clubs and have been a member of clubs for a long time think about making endorsements of candidates.
And I'll say that, that totally goes against the new people coming in and wanting to change things, which seems to be happening a lot these days.
Yes.
Where there's so many new people who are involved, and a lot of new people who are involved are looking for sweeping change.
That's right.
And new things to happen, and the status quo is not acceptable. And to longer standing members of a lot of organizations and clubs, the status quo and those long-term relationships are what's worked in the past. So there is a kind of a little bit of a culture clash, which we're not going to go into today.
No, some other time.
But that's out there as well, and that makes it more volatile but interesting right now in politics.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of interesting, let's talk about petitioning.
I love how you put those two things in a single sentence, because I would not think that petitioning was interesting at all, but it is necessary.
Totally necessary.
It is important.
You know what? It's an interesting process. Back in the day, political bosses decided who got on the ballot, and there was no petitioning, and everybody who doesn't, everybody who hates standing on the street asking for signatures, and everybody who hates being asked for signatures by people standing on the street, were all much happier, except for the fact that there was no way for new people to participate in the process, because if we think the establishment is like controlling things now, back in the day, there was nothing you could do to get on the ballot without the say-so of Democratic or Republican or other party bosses. Petitioning was invented so that anybody could go and gather signatures and end up in the primary or end up in the general election. And you do petition separately for both of them.
Okay, so I'm going to break this down for people who don't understand, as I did not. So when you see people on the street with those green sheets of paper asking for signatures,
Like such,
they're getting signatures to enable people to be put on a ballot.
correct.
Right? So that's what that's for. It's not that you're signing, I don't know what people think that they're signing, but it's specifically for supporting the people who are listed, because it's usually more than one person. It's like a party platform.
Yes. Or a slate.
A slate, right. A slate of candidates to enable them to be put on the petition so that they can be voted on in the primary
Correct.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the general.
And sometimes in the
not
general.
all of the not every candidate is petitioning to get on a Democratic primary line or a Republican primary line. Some candidates go straight to the general election. And
But let's not talk about them right now.
Sure.
Because we're talking about primaries
Yes.
and petitioning for primaries. So that's when you see somebody on the street and they're asking for your signature, and if you're a registered Democrat, that's what they're asking for. So my little PSA, please stop and sign.
yes, and what I will also add.
I want a graphic. Please stop and sign.
Please stop and sign. What I'll also make sure to say is there's very little or almost no personal information required. It is simply your name, your signature, and your address without need for an apartment number or anything.
And this is information that the party already has.
Yes,
So
if
not
you're
giving away
registered to
something
vote,
that-
this is already
Right.
public information or information that the party and the Board of Elections
Right, so
already
you're not
has.
giving away
It's nothing new.
any secrets. One thing, well, a couple of things I want you to clear up.
Yeah,
One thing, you've got a slate of candidates.
yeah,
And you've got a bunch of people out on the street.
yeah,
You have mentioned that you only really need to sign once
yeah.
for a person. What if somebody really wants to sign every petition that they see because it makes them feel good about saying yes to somebody? What happens to those 15 signatures that the same person has given?
Well, that is a very nice person. I'd love to meet them. But
That's my goal this year. I'm signing
Signing
every
all of them?
petition that I'm eligible for, and that's the other thing I want to talk to you about.
Right.
What are you eligible to sign?
sure, okay, so first, what happens if somebody signs a bunch of petitions? Well, for every office, you can have multiple candidates running, of course, but every petition only has one candidate for every potential seat. And when you sign for the slate of candidates, then you're saying, these are the people who I'd like to see on the ballot. Unfortunately, you can only do that for one candidate. If you sign for 2 or 3 different candidates running for the same seat, so you've got a contested election and there's 3 people running for mayor or 3 people running for state senate, whatever it is, and you sign for all of them to get on the ballot, only the first one will count.
So who is tracking? How does that happen? So somebody signed all these petitions, and now who's keeping track of the time that you voted for candidate A versus candidate C?
This is a great question, and I'm gonna say we'll deal with that question in depth at another time because it has to do with how politicians fight to keep each other off the ballot to reduce competition. But long story short, nobody's really checking that until, or what I will say, the people who check it are the campaigns themselves. And if a campaign is not concerned about a challenger in the election, they'll just let it slide. But ultimately, the campaigns are responsible for keeping each other accountable, and then they file grievances or complaints with the Board of
Ooh.
Elections.
I helped in one of those in District 1?
Oh yeah, CD1, sure,
Right.
absolutely.
Right, Margaret Chin and Chris Marlowe.
So these are what's known
and it was
as
so close, and then
yeah.
the campaigns were sort of arguing over who got what,
These are what's known as petition challenges.
and that's what that was about.
We can go all the way into that in another episode. It's super interesting
It is, and
and
actually
really
it's
just kind of like
fascinating.
disconcerting in some ways. But that's
So that's
who's
when
meant
that
to
comes
keep
into
it.
play.
Yeah.
So in the general sense, nobody's really checking until it becomes an issue, and then people kind of go through with a magnifying glass.
Exactly
to figure
right.
out the timing and all that. Okay,
That's right.
great. So
Second, eligibility. Oh,
we're running out of time. So what else?
did you want to ask a question about eligibility real quick?
Eligibility. Also, I want to ask about how names get onto the petition.
Oh, how do people get on the petition?
Yeah.
This is actually a fantastic question, which brings us full circle. The folks who are on the petition are the people endorsed by the clubs and the organizations.
Full circle.
The main point of doing endorsements is so that members of an organization who are volunteers will be compelled to go out and gather signatures for the endorsed candidates. And that is why it's so important for candidates like me to go to places like Village Independent Democrats or Downtown Independent Democrats or Village Reform Democratic Club. Those are all the clubs in my district. If I leave one out, I won't get their endorsement. It's so important for politicians to go and solicit these endorsements because without them, I have to gather hundreds or sometimes thousands of signatures by myself or build up my own volunteer base
Got it.
or spend money on paid petitioners.
So you, by getting endorsements, are then able to use the resources of these different clubs and organizations to help you get
Exactly.
your signature. So if you're on a list with a bunch of other people, your signature counts for you as long as that signature counts for that person, that signature counts for that person.
That's
And
right.
so you don't have to go out and stand in a corner by yourself.
That's right.
People can, though, if I'm right, choose to not get endorsements and go out and do it on their own.
Absolutely.
Somebody could just say, hey, I feel like running for senator. I'm just going to go stand at a subway stop, no petitioning with any group or club.
That's right.
So anybody can. It just is much more difficult if you don't have the endorsements of groups because their resources help you get the job done.
Right. And so and as I mentioned, this process didn't used to exist. It was invented to empower people like that, and it ultimately empowered local civic organizations like political clubs or civic associations,
Right.
which then had a way to run their own candidates and get people that they supported on the ballot. Again, you used to have to go through political party bigwigs
Right.
to get anything done, and this opened that process up to
So it's
others.
like a help me, help you sort of thing.
Well, right, and so a lot of times, when we talk about clubs or the establishment or all these folks who are already invested in the system, these are folks who have been doing this sort of work for a long time, and clubs will compete with each other to get the most signatures because it gives them the most influence, but it also requires them to be the most active people, to have the largest organizations. And the idea is these are proxies for how a community feels, and so why shouldn't they have more of a say?
Got it. So I'm going to close with a couple of quick things. One, if you see somebody on the street with a petition, think about signing it, or at
Please.
least think about acknowledging their presence. I was dissed so many times on the street, and I was so surprised, and then I realized that I do the same thing. I would see somebody with a clipboard, and I would pretend I didn't see them. So please stop and sign. That's my first thing. My second thing is, when it comes to the primaries, go vote.
Oh yeah.
Last year, huge tumult after the 2016 election. Everybody was angry. Everybody wanted to participate. Everybody wanted to do something, at least people I knew. And less than 8% of people in New York City voted in the primary.
Oh, you go Volt.
Exactly. That's a time, this is a way for people to participate. It doesn't take a lot of energy. You just go to your local place and you fill out the paper and slide it through the machine. It's not that big a deal, but this is what matters and this is what makes a difference. So 2 takeaways from this week: sign petitions and vote in the primaries. And yours?
I think that basically covers it.
All right.
Sign the petitions, look at who's running, and definitely when folks are on the ballot, vote.
Yeah. Oh, and come see Ben Yee speak.
Oh yeah.
This Thursday,
March 8th.
March 8th,
Yeah.
Village Independent Democrats. We will have where it's going to be in
On
the
the
notes
board.
under this thing when we post it. All right. All set.
Laters.
See you soon.